All she wanted was to send webhooks and not have to think about it. I'm sure. Oh, you know what? I know another guy that had exactly the same problem. So I came to her like, hey, if I build it for you, will you pay me? We want to feel like an extension of your team.
Yeah.
In the sense that if, Barack from your team decides to build webhooks,
Yeah.
and you have a problem, you can ping him.
Yeah.
And he will help you figure out what you went wrong or help. And that's the experience we're trying to replicate. Oh, by the way, I can build your product much better than you can. This is the approach that almost every developer has.
Yeah. Especially the more senior you become, it's the more skeptical you are of net new. And then the most senior engineers are like, no, why would I build this? I'm going to use it. It's again, this kind of bell curve there too. Those have been our best customers as well, is the ones that have really tried and felt the pain. And again, it's not that they're not capable of doing it. Yeah, well, Tom, thanks for taking the time to join us in the office today for this new episode of Hard Software. Especially as you know, our team's always been a pretty big fan of Svix, and I've been users, and in the past, especially Barack on our team, who was heavily leveraging y'all at Benchling, with especially at kind of the crazy scale that they ended up hitting before you joined the Vem team. So excited to have you on board and discuss all things developer experience, what folks are really missing about webhooks. And I think especially the importance of all of these event-driven access patterns, with how folks are just really implementing a lot more kind of autonomous and probabilistic systems across the board throughout their stack. But I definitely won't do it justice if I, fill in the blanks for you. So would just love to have you kind of introduce yourself, as well as, talk through a bit more about Svix and the product as it is now. And then we can go from there.
Yes, sounds like a plan. So I'm Tom, founder and CEO of Svix. We do webhook sending as a service. What it means essentially is that we give you a simple API.
Yeah.
And then we take care of webhooks for you. Maybe I can start with where we started.
Yeah, let's do that.
So I think really our origin story is really all about it was really luck. We were I was in this, actually I built a product before this, and in our previous business, people were asking us for webhooks. And we kind of looking into it and just okay, it makes sense. And we started looking into building it, and then we just realized, we don't have the capacity to build it now. So we kind of sat down. And then people, came back, more people as well, asking us for webhooks still. And we just looked into it, let's figure it out. We're going to build it. But what about the maintenance? And then we looked into that, and we just, it's just too much maintenance. We need to get focused on our roadmap. So we said no again.
Yeah.
And then people kept asking us still. And then we figured out, okay, we can find the time to build it. Maintenance, we can figure it out. But then we realized that, we built this perfect API. Not perfect, but a very good API, great product. We're very proud of that. We're not going to have a terrible webhook experience. So we said no again, because we just don't have the capacity to do 2x, 3x the work that we previously did. And I wish I realized at that point that there was a business there. But it was only a few months later, when I wasn't working on that business anymore. That someone asked a silly question about webhooks on a Slack community I'm a member of. And I started explaining to her, you need to do the X, and you need to do Y, and you need to do the thing. And I just realized she actually couldn't care less about anything I was saying. All she wanted was to send webhooks and not have to think about it. I'm sure. Oh, you know what? I know another guy that had exactly the same problem. So I came to her hey, if I build it for you, will you pay me? As a product, not as a thing. And she just hell yeah. And then someone else chimed in yeah, I'll pay you as well. And someone else said current company not sending webhooks, previous company, massive hassle, happy to intro you.
Yeah.
So I built it. By the way, she never became a customer. But the other people from the thread became our first customers. And that's kind of how it started.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and I think that's the best way to kind of, I feel find an early sense of okay, there's a product that could be looking there's PMF possible there's just when people are pulling you into it and actually just being I will throw dollars at you and just chiming up. I think that is funny enough, a similar fashion to how we ended up starting BEM as well. It was number one, we faced this problem ourselves internally. And kind of as you were, alluding to with some of your, customers with that ask, was that even though it may be something where it's oh, we're engineers, we can build it. It's do we have the bandwidth and the time and the capacity, just given all of the other pieces that we need to own this part of a core, our core infrastructure? And I would love to kind of get into build versus buy later, but first, maybe we can jump into like, webhooks are one of those, problem spaces that especially for, very strong software engineers ostensibly is like, it's straightforward. It's basic event driven stuff. Like you throw a queue there, you manage some light state and blah, blah, blah. But like, what do folks get wrong? Especially when they start like scaling up and it goes from handfuls to like maybe millions of events an hour, let's say.
Yeah. So I think first of all, let me start by saying I'm like an engineering maximalist as to this. Like I think we can build anything.
Yeah.
Like every, competent engineers can really build the world. Totally. I mean, by the way, all the other software was built by competent engineers. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think like every product that we use, people can build it and we can build it. The question is like, should we spend the time on it?
Exactly.
So actually let's talk specifically about webhooks, like what you're asking. Webhooks are really just post requests, right? So like you get something happens, you just make a post request. That's very easy.
Exactly.
But then what happens is that, if that post request takes a bit more time, so just like, okay, yeah, you can't do it inbound, in band. Yeah, it's a bit silly. So let's like move it to a background worker. Again, as I said, engineers can do it. We do background attacks all the time, or durable execution or anything like that.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So we've solved that. But then like, what about noisy neighbor? Like we have one customer that's very big, another customer that's small. Are we gonna, we're gonna affect small one? No. So you have to deal with that. And then essentially what you see is that you find yourself dealing with, 100,000 paper cuts that, I mean, some of them are not paper cuts, by the way. Some of them are much larger, but like 100,000 things that you either haven't considered or maybe considered, but haven't realized how big of a problem that's going to be when things start picking up. And also, to be honest, like we focus all of our time on webhooks. We were also surprised a few times to look at the way we're just like, oh God, this is something that, we need to take care of. And it comes, in a variety of flavors, right? I mean, first of all, like infrastructure stuff, like noise neighbors that I mentioned, all of that. But also it just comes in terms of functionality. Was it yesterday? I think yesterday or the day before, I spoke with a friend of mine, and he was talking about yesterday, and we're talking about one of his like the products that they use, like a very famous SaaS company, and they do webhooks. They're very competent engineers. They build a great system, but there are like a few things that they need that the system doesn't provide. Yeah, and for all that service they care about, like they built webhooks. So like what happens is that this customer is having like a terrible experience. He's complaining to me about it. Yeah. And not just because I do webhooks. It was actually complaining about it regardless. And it just like, the thing is, you want to make it easy for your customers to consume those events because you want them to integrate with you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So like every alpha you can get there is like super important. And I think that's where a lot of the pain comes from. It's just like having to iterate on the product on and on.
Yeah. And, you've already started kind of touching on this and like the value prop here, but like, I think we at BEM really empathize with this, especially in our sales process. And we're very close to the Launch Darkly team and Edith Harbaugh, who's one of the founders there. And, again, like just like with Svix and webhooks, it is one of those problems that, obviously really competent engineers can obviously like solve if they put the time and effort into it. So like from y'all's perspective, how do you approach that build versus buy conversation, especially with, maybe let's say, there's like a higher up at an organization that knows this is something they don't want to spend time on and is trying to get buy-in from the engineering team being like, it's just a post request. It is just some state management where like, and to kind of touch on like Launch Darkly, for example, in comparison for them, it's just like, it's just feature flags, like we can just build this. And even for BEM, for us, it's like, despite the relative complexity of like all these variations of documents, it's like we're just writing file parsers or like we're just doing some light semantic analysis we can throw into not even OpenAI's like API, just like we can just use ChatGPT for. So would love to hear your perspective on that and what you've noticed has been successful for y'all, and even more importantly, just like for like all of us have done, like what maybe early mistakes you may have made along the way to like that help you learn about that build versus buy kind of value prop there.
Yeah. So I think it varies. It changes to based on the business. But like, I mean, taking even Launch Darkly, right? Mm-hmm. It is literally just an if statement, right?
Yeah.
At its core.
Yes.
Or even like the famous hack and use comment about Dropbox. What are you talking about? It's just like rsync and I don't know very well. And I think that's true. Like, Launch Darkly is just, it's just an if statement. We are just like a post request.
Yes. Yeah.
But the question is that like, what is the value that you want to get? And like, if you don't use Launch Darkly, like all of a sudden the if statement means a redeploy.
Yes.
Or a reconfigure. Like,
or what team what engineering team that's built feature flags internally is actually disciplined about cleaning them up?
Yeah,
It was
zero.
Yeah, like show me that team. I would love to be that team, but I don't think I'm that one yet.
Yeah, no, we're definitely not that, of course. Yeah, we kind of every few years you come in and just like, oh my god, I guess this needs to go. This it's been only zero for 4 years.
Or a new engineer joins and then they're like, a very valid question. It's like, oh, like this flag is turned on for maybe 2 out of hundreds of our users. What does it mean? And then folks are like, what does it? Like, how does that affect? Like, anyways, yeah.
Yeah, so for sure. So I think first of all, like I think the first thing about build versus buy is kind of like taking out of this like reductionist attitude of looking at the components and really looking at kind of like essentially ROI, right? So again, people actually, we have a lot of teams that switch to us after they built webhooks and spend a few years on it, like doing a lot of things. And the reason why is that they don't want to deal with it anymore. They don't want to like be woken up. Engineers are paged in the middle of the night for like something they don't care about.
Yeah.
So our approach really differs depending on the company and where they are. But like if they're just building webhooks for the first time, for example, like the time to market is a significant advantage, and we can talk about that. And you can build it yourself, but you're gonna iterate on this for like the next year, and you're gonna have a initial version only 6 months, and then also you remember all of those nice to have, and I put it with like air quotes things. You're not going to have them for a while.
You just keep pushing them off on your technical roadmap because, the product and user experience always comes first.
Yeah. And then essentially what happens is that you kind of like, you built webhooks, you check that box, but actually your customers don't think you built webhooks because they don't have what they expect out of like, whether it's, fanning out to multiple endpoints, retries, observability, all of that.
Signatures, like just some basic authentication and like checksums, that kind of thing.
So I think like time to market is definitely an important one. And then like another thing is just showing them, kind of going back to launch darkly, showing them like what is there beyond the if statement.
Exactly.
And then, like the people that switch to you after they build their own solution. And I think that is like a very, it's a much easier discussion because they already been through the journey. They know all the pain and they kind of like, okay, we're ready we don't want the pain anymore.
Those have been our best customers as well, is the ones that like have really tried and felt the pain. And again, it's not that they're like not capable of doing it. It's just like, I don't want to keep maintaining this. And I don't want to keep adding that new like features and stuff. And it's like kind of like yet another one of those examples, and especially in technology and engineering, of that Dunning-Kruger effect of like, you start and you're being like, what's so complicated about that? And then you like kind of end up in this pit of like, I'm just like treading water to keep these things up and balancing all the rest of these priorities. And then you kind of, come up to the hill of like, maybe you've scaled your engineering team large enough to be like, cool, we can eat the cost. And this is, not just critical infrastructure, but this is actually like our IP. There's very rarely is, or webhooks your IP, or document processing or feature flags being your like IP. There are some cases where that is. And of course, like, that decision is to build like in-house, but very rarely like, is it there? And I think that, for us segues like really well into developer experience, given like, a similar kind of challenge that all of these kind of teams that we've discussed like have, is just that obviously, even when you are hoisting away like the relative like complexity after like getting like implemented like in your like product like there, you still need to nail and appeal to developers, given like, look, like a lot of your best customers are extremely strong engineering teams. They also very understandably are really discerning of that experience. It really does have to make sense, feel intuitive, actually improve their like lives like day to day there. So we love to think about like both philosophically and like even a bit more tangibly, like how y'all kind of approach that, like think through that, and how you guys think through designing that product experience. It's like developers it's just like a sigh of relief when they aren't able to kind of use a tool like Svix.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to start with the end for a second, but then I'm going to jump to the beginning. I think, one of the sighs of relief is that when someone comes back with a requirement 6 months down the line, or 2 months down the line, or 3 months down the line, like from a customer, there's like a deal that has to close.
Yes.
If they add MTLS, then they just go to us and they just go to the dashboard and just enable MTLS, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I think just knowing that whatever it is that they don't even know that they need yet is going to be there, because, you guys are experts, right? We are experts. So like this is literally what we do day in, day out. So like whatever you're facing, trust me, I've seen it 100 times already, and I'm going to have something for you.
Yeah.
And so I think that is like a good part of what developers also look for, is just knowing that this is a long-term partner and not just, I mean, one of, Recent is one of our customers, and like in this case study, which I really appreciated, he said that we are one of the only vendors, or maybe the only vendor under the AWS that they actually grew with. Everyone else was just like good for that beginning, and then like, oh, we outgrew you guys, and like not Svix. Yeah. And I think this is something we care about. But now to your actual question, the beginning. So tell me if you disagree with this, but like I think developers, we're very skeptical of everyone.
Of course, yeah.
And again, by the way, I can build your product much better than you can. Like this is the approach that almost every developer has.
Yeah,
always.
We've all got a little bit, especially like the more senior you become, it's like the more skeptical you are of net new. And then like the most senior engineers are like, no, why would I build this? I'm going to use it. It's again like this kind of bell curve like there too. There.
Yeah, I love that meme with the Jedi thing.
Exactly that.
Yeah, that's my life. Yeah, oftentimes. Yeah. So I think, like just making them feel like you know what you're doing, I think is like an important part, and showing that every step of the way. And I think, like one key part of developer experience, in my point of view, and like I tell it to the team all the time, is actually support.
Yeah.
The best support is not needing support. So the product needs to explain itself, and like the docs need to be amazing. And we focus a lot on both of them. And these are more traditional developer experience aspects. But like for us, support is a big aspect. Like, like we want to feel like an extension of your team.
Yeah.
In the sense that if, Barak from your team like decides to build webhooks, and you have a problem, you can ping him.
Yeah.
And he will help you figure out what you went wrong, or like help. And that's the experience we're trying to replicate. So really get it so the developers know that we are there for them, and we are essentially an equivalent replacement to building it yourself in more aspect than one.
Yeah. That's a really good way of putting it. And like and I think that bit about being that team member, I think that's a really great way of framing it, because it's like, when folks build these services in-house, there's always that one expert like initially. But then like there's this like kind of senior engineering problem where unfortunately they become a blocker, and they feel like they are a blocker because it's like anyone needs to build a net new service. It's like they got to go to them, and it's like, and engineers, it's like, folks can be good to at some point with documentation and whatnot, and even with the advent of a lot of these co-pilot tools that kind of help and analyze that, but it is still that kind of funnel and like blocker like there to really being able to succeed as fast as possible, and like framing that product as being an excellent engineering team member that's always there, that is kind of explainable and like intuitive, like I think is a really solid framing like there. Are there like also like, are there any particular like tools or like open source software or like other companies, old or new, that you think like really philosophically align with you, or you've taken like a lot of inspiration from, or you just kind of admire from a developer experience perspective there?
Yeah, I don't know if I can point out a specific. I mean, Recent, one of our customers, I think they really focus on that, and it shows. Like they just really spend a lot of time on making that easier for people. And so I think they're really pushing the boundaries in many ways, and maybe in some ways stuff that we haven't replicated yet, because either we don't fully agree with that, or we think like it doesn't apply to us. But I think really my approach always in life, like it's just kind of osmosis of the world.
Yeah.
It's just like I absorb everyone, and I really can't actually point out who did a great job, because I'm just like, I'm absorbing everyone all the time. The only reason like why Recent is top of mind is because like, like I speak with them every now and then, and then I see them pushing the envelope. But other than that.
That's awesome. Yeah. Like switching gears a bit, given, I know you kind of obsess and think about this a lot, and it's like, built into as like a first class way in your platform is like this differentiation between polling and and real time, like, or real time ish, like streaming there. And like, this like classical, I would say, rather than problem, like decision making between synchronous and like asynchronous. Like I think like all of these kind of access patterns really, are difficult and interesting choices to make for various products, like even within like, like internally, like within teams there. So would love to hear your perspective about like how you guys like approach those problem spaces, and you build, and how you've kind of built that into your product where it helps maybe make decision making and testing of like the pros and cons between those approaches easier for your users.
Yeah. So actually, I'm going to jump back to developer experience for just 1 second because it really relates to here. Like one of our philosophies as well is not giving people foot guns.
Yeah.
And just like, don't help people hang themselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
So and the reason why I'm mentioning it now is actually we've been very careful about adding functionality that we think can be misused. And we're very careful about adding, like the problem with an API product is the moment we add a flag, that is there to stay. That's
exactly.
it.
There's a quote there's like a concept that at least like Barack and I on our team talk about a lot called Hiram's Law. And like you can actually see there's like one example of this that I can think of off the top of my head in Golang's like net HTTP package where it's like there's a comment over this one type of error where it's like you cannot change this because so much critical infrastructure like I can't imagine what would break in Kubernetes, for example, if like that error message and that string was like changed and like whatnot there. So it's like if it exists and it's like out there, it will be used. It will be used. It will be relied on for something critical, especially with something like a product like yours, which is relied on as infrastructure.
Yeah. And the thing is, right? I mean, like having an issue at runtime is like the worst kind of part. Like compile time, we're like okay with that. Like,
we can fix it.
Yeah, that's it. But like runtime, and especially if it will only happen like once in a million, it's terrible. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's kind of like one of the challenges of like having an API is just like you can't break stuff. And so we're very careful about adding stuff. And when it comes to like polling, it took us actually a long time to decide to really add it. The thing is, what's nice about webhooks, what I really love about webhooks is that they're stateless and they're HTTP. Exactly. So take any engineer or any AI agent off the street, they will know how to deal with webhooks.
Yeah.
And when it comes to polling, actually, there are like a lot of challenges come with it. And you see that in the Kafka world a lot, which is like people, poll for the same kind of like from the same place, and then they poll the same thing, or they override the marker or the iterator.
Even though like topics and repeatability are supposed to be first-class features, like do we always utilize those interfaces the best?
Yeah. And it's sometimes it's very hard, right? Sometimes like it's not very clear how you should do it. So like, we've been like avoiding this for the longest time, but actually now we've built like enough of an ecosystem around Svix that we can, just embed that polling endpoint in like some of the utilities that we already build. And, and we hope that people are not going to use them wrong. And we're going to add like some, guardrails, even more guardrails. But yeah, that's kind of like why we've avoided it. But the nice thing about polling is that you get everything in order. You can control the pace.
Exactly. Page through it, sort like batch, like read in, like,
And it's fully, because it's pull versus push, it's like, it's fully controlled by the consumer.
Totally.
But I love webhooks. Like I think again, and actually it's a love-hate relationship. I don't think they're like the best solution for everything, but I think they are ubiquitous for a reason.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, you reference agents there. And I think what I want to like dig in with you next is, especially just where your kind of product is situated, like has the advent of like, this change between, folks like previously probably using y'all for very straightforward deterministic kind of processes and communication that, I wouldn't necessarily say is the most predictable, but at least there are trends in throughput and whatnot, as well as like that direct access pattern. Like now we moved into where there's much more probabilistic computing is much more out in the wild. It's much more regular. It's like really taking over in a lot of senses. And like, webhooks and polling like really do fall into place there with a lot of how these like agents or like probabilistic systems need to access certain services and like data or whatnot. I would love to hear your kind of observation around like how that's like affected Svix, if you guys are seeing like a lot of pull or like usage on those notes, as well as like if like this, new change and kind of advent and how folks are building like software has changed your perspective on like how Svix is designed or how these access patterns should evolve.
So I think first of all, let me say, like one of the metrics that we track as a company is we did YC, and like one of the things we track is like how much of the batch is using us.
Totally.
And in a way, kind of like webhooks are kind of a funny beast, because like usually a 2-person startup doesn't need webhooks yet.
Yeah.
Not always anyway.
Yeah.
And especially like, like the batches nowadays are they have a lot of AI agents.
Yeah.
And it's been great to see that, like the percentage of the batch users, like we're one of the top deals like on Bookface, and like the percentage actually keeps on just growing up.
Oh, cool.
So I think people are starting to use webhooks earlier. So I think that's great. And that is driven by the kind of like the AI agents and what you said, which is, they're autonomous computing, like they react to events and they want to do something. And in that world, like event driven, which is what we do, is a key part.
Yeah, essentially. Awesome. Yeah, like, I mean, that's really all I had on my end. Anything else you want to kind of chat through from your end or highlight, or any announcements to make from the Svix end you want to talk through?
No, not yet, not spoiler, but like a lot of, we have like a lot of product launches that
Awesome.
planned for the next few months. So stay tuned.
Yeah. So we're excited to see what y'all like cook up, and I'm sure a lot of other folks are. But thank you so much for taking the time to kind of hop on with us today. And I always love to hear like experiences from other folks like also focusing on these like critical infrastructure products, especially folks who our team really has enjoyed kind of working with in the past, and like appreciate you sharing those like perspectives like there. And y'all hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
All right.
That like someone asked like a silly question about webhooks on a Slack community I'm a member of. And I started like explaining to her, you need to do the X, and you need to do Y, and you need to do the thing. And I just realized she actually couldn't care less about anything I was saying. All she wanted was to send webhooks and not have to think about it. I'm sure, you know what? I know another guy that had exactly the same problem. So I came to her like, hey, if I build it for you, will you pay me? Like as a product, not as a thing. And she just like, hell yeah. And then someone else chimed in like, yeah, I'll pay you as well. And like someone else said like, like current company not sending webhooks, previous company, massive hassle, happy to intro you. Yeah. So I built it. By the way, she never became a customer. But the other people from the thread became our first customers. And that's kind of how it started. All she wanted was to send webhooks and not have to think about it. I'm sure, you know what? I know another guy that had exactly the same problem. So I came to her like, hey, if I build it for you, will you pay me? Like as a product, not as a thing. And she just like, hell yeah. And then someone else chimed in like, yeah, I'll pay you as well. And like someone else said like, like current company not sending webhooks, previous company, massive hassle, happy to intro you. Yeah. So I built it. By the way, she never became a customer. But the other people from the thread became our first customers. And that's kind of how it started. Webhooks are really just post requests, right? So like you get something happens, you just make a post request. That's very easy.
Exactly.
But then what happens is that, if that post request takes a bit more time, so just like, okay, yeah, you can't do it inbound, in band. Yeah, it's a bit silly. So let's like move it to a background worker. Again, as I said, engineers can do it. We do background attacks all the time, or durable execution or anything like that. Yeah. Great. Okay. So we've solved that. But then like, what about noisy neighbor? Like we have one customer that's very big, another customer that's small. Are we going to we're going to affect small one? No. So you have to deal with that. And then essentially what you see is that you find yourself dealing with, 100,000 paper cuts that, I mean, some of them are not paper cuts, by the way. Some of them are much larger, but like 100,000 things that you either haven't considered or maybe considered, but haven't realized how big of a problem that's going to be. Yeah. So I think first of all, let me start by saying I'm like an engineering maximalist as to this. Like I think we can build anything.
Yeah.
Like every, competent engineers can really build the world. I mean, by the way, all the other software was built by competent engineers. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think like every product that we use, people can build it and we can build it. The question is like, should we spend the time on it?
Exactly.
So the best support is not needing support. So the product needs to explain itself, and like the docs need to be amazing. And we focus a lot on both of them. And these are more traditional developer experience aspects. But like for us, support is a big aspect. Like, like we want to feel like an extension of your team.
Yeah.
In the sense that if, Barak from your team like decides to build webhooks, and you have a problem, you can ping him.
Yeah.
And he will help you figure out what you went wrong or like help. And that's the experience we're trying to replicate. So really get it. So the developers know that we are there for them, and we are essentially an equivalent replacement to building it yourself in more aspect than one. Again, people actually, we have a lot of teams that switch to us after they built webhooks and spend a few years on it, but like doing a lot of things. And the reason why is that they don't want to deal with it anymore. Yeah. They don't want to like be woken up, or, engineers are paged in the middle of the night for like something they don't care about.